We all need to conserve energy and reduce our carbon footprints. That's why.
Hello. This is Cambridge Inside Out. I'm Susanna Sagat.
And I'm Robert Winters, the other guy.
Welcome to our show. I don't know if you've noticed, but there is someone sitting between us.
Yeah, so I guess I should introduce myself.
I wish you would.
All right, I'm John Howard. I was invited onto the show by Susanna a couple of weeks ago. I'm president of the Porter Square Neighbors Association. I live in North Cambridge, and I've also been participating in the current election in a number of ways. I did most of the organization for one of the debates between the candidates, and I've been spending almost every day at the recount for this last week.
Oh,
And
good. We can get some good gossip from you.
Oh,
but
no,
first,
no, John and I have already exchanged all that gossip.
no, we want to share. I haven't
oh,
heard it.
Okay.
First, it's election day. If anyone's watching live and you're in the Mass Congressional District number 5, go out and vote. I still haven't voted yet. Have you voted?
Yes, I voted this
Don't
morning
tell
early.
us who you voted for. Did you vote, Robert? You're
I
not.
did. I have this terrible fear that I'm going to break my continuous
I know. I can't wait
unbroken
to get
string.
out there.
So I always vote before I do anything. So okay, it's done. It's done. I'm not going to mess up. So yeah,
So
I did
please
it.
go vote if you haven't voted.
Right. Polls are open till 8 p.m. and I imagine they're doing probably a not particularly interesting vote count over at the senior center afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Why?
Well, they got ballot boxes they still got to bring in. All the scanners are being, they're doing
Oh,
the
that's
usual
true.
thing. So it's not as interesting as the PR count, but it is
No,
count.
because it doesn't matter, because the district is so varied that no matter what we do, it won't be the same as anywhere else.
Whenever they have these things that are sort of non-municipal elections and they do the vote count over at the senior center, what I always see are just people with cell phones and they're like checking in with, oh, how are things
Yeah.
over in Everett? How are things over
Oh,
in
yeah.
Somerville? And there's all these characters and not the
That's what
usual
matters.
characters. That's exactly what matters. That's absolutely
Okay,
right.
so tell us some gossip about the recount. What was it like? All we heard is that last week, Robert mentioned what happened.
Well,
That was last week. We've had 6 days of it since then. So what's happened since then?
well, you want to say, I'll give you my impression.
Yeah.
They're being extremely careful, unbelievably careful. The manual system is very, very redundant, and that's good. If there's a mistake made anywhere, there are about 5 opportunities to catch it. And they very carefully show every step of the way to all of the observers. So that's, I guess, how it's supposed to be. It does make it slightly more, but only slightly more than watching paint dry.
Right.
So is it almost over? What's happening?
No, I think we've got another third of it to go, 2 days or so.
I was talking to one of the consultants who works with the city on this, and we were over a beer afterwards.
Mhm.
We were kind of estimating that because they had to suspend it for today because of the election, but they have the room reserved through I guess Friday or Saturday. But I'm pretty sure now it's all the hard work, the annoying work is pretty much complete. So now they're cruising through. They've completed. There will be, I believe, 18 counts by the time it's done. They've gone all the way now through the 10th count, which is where they count. First off, the number 1 count votes was the first count, and then it was Leland Chung surplus, and then the very minor candidates who are under 50, and then candidates in sequence were Ron Peden, James Williamson, Leslie Phillips, James Lee, Ellie Arden, Gary Mello, and Luis Vasquez. So that got us to the 10th count, and I forget who's up next for the next person. Well, actually, of course, I can tell you. It's Mushtaq Mirza, and then House, Van Hoffman, etc. So each of the subsequent counts, when they get up to the deciding one, will be the 17th round.
Do you want us to show them this now, or not?
Yeah, you might as well just, why
Okay.
not? Why don't you
I'm the
just do that?
technology expert here.
Okay.
See, I
Yeah,
get
we're
to
going
push
to
this
geek out a
button.
little bit here.
Here we go.
All right.
Oh, that's
Wow, we got the
nice.
scroll there. Now, I hope that
Okay.
it's all sufficiently visible here, but the thing is that these are the numbers now for each of the individual counts, and we've now got to the 10th count at Vasquez. So it's not particularly meaningful to see where those numbers are, because as you start defeating subsequent candidates, some candidates may jump past others. So just because you see people in, first place, second place, third place right now, that could change a little bit. Not going to change all that much. But as we move into I guess starting tomorrow morning at the crack of 8:30, right, they will move on into the next count, which is Mushtaq Mirza being counted out, et cetera. And actually, can we, let's see, I think if you do press that, yeah, that other one right over there, if you just sort of scroll down to the second page, what you'll see is a little bit of falsehood, which is if you just use how the ballots transferred previously during the original official count and just use that as sort of an estimate for what we will probably be seeing in the subsequent ones. So I have tentative Mirza, tentative House at the top. It's just sort of, if you see it, unless something radical changes, what you see happening over in the deciding round, which is around the 17th count, you can see some of the margins there. And unless things radically change, I'm kind of guessing that it will still end up with the same winners and probably about somewhere between 16 to 20 vote margin between the 9th place and 10th place, which will again be Minka Van Busekum.
So it's expanded.
It's grown a little bit. It might converge back down a little bit because I think Sam Seidel ended up with quite a few more ballots in the surplus. So he's got a little 9 that's going to scatter, but I don't think they're going to scatter in any way that's going to give any particular advantage to any of them. So most of us are pretty much anticipating that, that it's going to be somewhere in that 15 to 20 ballot margin by the time all is said and done. But hey, it ain't over till it's over. So, but anyway, that's kind of where we stand right now. So anyway, leaving our wonderful numbers and back to our human faces.
So what was the human aspect of being there?
Well, they had to find an adequate room in very short notice, and that room is just barely enough space. It's not, there's actually a fair amount of space in the middle of the room, but they've got to make all of the stuff available for the watchers to watch. So all the important stuff is around the edge of the room. And with 25 candidates, they need about 27 or 28 tables, and that just doesn't fit. So they've had to do things like put 2 of the minor candidates on one table, for example, and then the people that are counting those were really crowded in.
They don't actually put the candidates on the tables.
Well,
That
yeah.
would be good, though.
Well, they have everything, yeah, right, that's it, yeah. But, boxes and piles of envelopes, and you can't move a ballot from one place to another without putting it in an envelope and writing something on
That's
the
right.
outside of the envelope.
Now, in principle, when they open up for business tomorrow morning, they could make it very comfortable because now they've defeated a bunch of candidates.
They could take away 10 tables.
They could take away 10 tables. They could just sort of leave the sheets up there and for public view, so if people want to look up some facts and figures. And
Well,
then
do they want people to be comfortable in there?
not too comfortable. I think they want to expedite the process.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing, if you sort of saw how quickly they could move through some of these counts, there'll be more ballots moved as you start to defeat the next few candidates. They will have a lot more ballots. 300, 400, 700 type ballots. And so those will take a little bit longer. But honestly, when they're actually counting them out, it's it's pretty deliberate. They shout them out. Actually, sometimes doing 2 at a time, and then they do as a sort of a stamping and validation period that probably takes more time than the actual transferring of the ballots. That's the tedious part, I think, is waiting for all those stampers to mark the ballots.
Yeah.
And are the candidates there?
Some of them, particularly the ones that are close to the edge are there.
Yeah, you tend to see most or all of them there quite often. But it's interesting. You also see some visitors. I've seen Tim Toomey comes by, Sam Seidel's come by. People who are not really in the hunt here, but they come by because it's interesting. And and it's just like in the old days. As we think back longingly of the Longfellow School days. There's a certain attraction because political and civic people just get to sort of shoot the breeze.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity for standing in the hall outside or something while they're moving envelopes around and talking with whoever you happen to be standing next to.
Yeah, I have this very weird role. I walk in because I'm usually like getting there for like a little bit before going off to teach my class, and because I'm always pontificating about the numbers and whatever. As soon as I walk in the room, it's like people they come around and go,
Well, you
I have
already
a question to
predicted
ask
what's
you.
going to happen.
I know.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they run up to Rob. They run up to you and they say,
Robert,
Robert, what's
what are we
going to
doing?
happen?
What's going to happen,
As if he's.
He's already fed the computer the
Yeah,
answer.
but it is kind of a funny atmosphere when you're sort of in that little roll very, in a week from now, 1 week from now, people say, who are you? Wait, I recognize you, don't I? You were that guy somewhere. Weren't you on TV with that woman,
Yeah.
that Sagat? That's
Yeah.
about it, yeah. So I can go back to my anonymity starting next week. That'd be great, yeah.
So Friday, you think will be the last day?
I'm hopeful that they'll do most of it Wednesday. They'll definitely probably have to carry over into Thursday. It's possible, honestly, once they get through they only have to go through the next to last round, and then the last one is sort of a formality. At that point, I don't think anybody's even going to be watching and validating because the decision will already be made, so.
Well, but people still need to work. They still
Yeah.
need to get those ballots finished.
But once they get up to, they'll go Mercer, House, Hoffman, Logan Leslie, Jefferson Smith, Sam Seidel. I mean, that's a lot. That could spill over into Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
But then once they do the Reeves transfer, that's it. The margins will be settled. And then everybody will know who won. And then it'll just be some of the job of the election workers to parse them out to bring everybody up to quota.
Excellent.
So I think they could do it by Thursday.
Good.
And if they need a little bit of Friday, maybe they gotta go to Friday. So, anyway, so it's not.
And then we go on to inauguration, voting for mayor.
Oh yeah, and already I'm talking to the councilors and councilors-elect, and some of them are privately saying what their inclinations are on the mayoral vote. Yeah, but there's a lot of time between now and the end of December, early January before, where a lot of those allegiances and may shift around. I think for the most part, I think that for the most part, when someone has given some sort of commitment to vote for somebody for mayor, they tend to hold their word pretty tightly.
Mm-hmm.
So if people are making commitments now, and I know some who already are,
Do you have the answer for that too?
I don't have the answer for that.
John, do you have the answer
No,
for that?
I don't have the answer for that.
But because there really are only, I'd say, at most 4 people who are in the hunt for mayor this time, as opposed to, I think, about 8 last time, because none of the newcomers are really in the hunt for mayor. There's a much better chance that they will resolve this quickly, and maybe even before inauguration day. That's certainly conceivable, unless it's deadlocked at 4 votes and 3 and 2. For some. But I honestly, I think it'll probably go pretty quickly this time. Just speaking off the top of my head there.
Well, Robert, since we brought John in here, should we talk to him?
Yeah, I was wondering, who is this guy here? Oh, yeah. So, John,
Yes.
tell us about Porter Square Neighbors.
All right. So I'll tell a little bit about myself and a little about PSNA.
Okay.
I came to Porter Square about in the early 90s, sometime, 93 or something.
Okay.
And the shopping center was just about to go through its big remodeling. I wasn't actually part of that initial process there, but that brought the Porter Square Neighbors Association to life. Actually, it had been in existence before. It had originally been formed to fight the 5 or the 7 screen movie theater that was proposed for the Galleria building, and had sort of gone quiet. But then when the shopping center big renovation came along, it formed, and there was a very long drawn and, for as far as I know, very positive negotiation, 3-way negotiation between the city and the PSNA representing the neighbors and the shopping center, the Gravstar Corporation.
Now, were you there for that?
I was not in that negotiation.
No, but the formation of the
yeah,
group.
I was in the neighborhood, and I watched it, but I didn't participate.
So
at
how
that
did
time.
it form? I mean, for other groups trying to form into a neighborhood
For other groups,
association,
how to form?
tell us how you.
Well, I think, first of all, there was at that time a fellow by the name of Paul Myers, who was the president, who was very active and quite involved. And,
I remember him.
And I think worked quite effectively. From the side of Gravstar, Gravstar itself had representatives there, but the person to give the credit to is Cy Shapiro from Tags Hardware, who has been a long-term, contributor to the community, and I think he really pushed the shopping center's side of those negotiations. But the architects and the planners and for all the things for Gravstar were certainly a big part of the thing. And I'm not quite sure how the city got involved, But they basically appointed a special committee. And there may even have been an appointed citizens committee of the whole bunch of them to actually have a formal negotiation. Because what came out at the end of the thing was a contract, a letter of understanding signed by all three parties, specifying various things that would and would not happen. For example, many of the people in the neighborhood had been concerned because they had lost the ability to turn left onto Mass Ave out of the parking lot. And that put a lot of cars, or certainly had the perception, it put a lot of cars running back through the back streets of the neighborhood, going around 3 or 4 blocks in order to get
That's still
going
happening.
south. Well, but we had a long-term commitment from the city to figure out how to make a left turn possible.
And how is that?
And there is one there now. You go out past the CVS building, and there's a special little lane. It goes through what was going to be a whole plaza. We sort of cut the plaza in half. I'm getting a little ahead of myself.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But anyway,
Just
so there
trying
was
to
this
figure out how
memorandum
to
of,
turn
yeah,
left
there was
there.
this memorandum of understanding, or whatever it was called, specifying all of this and binding, well, basically binding the shopping center and the city to do certain things. The left turn was the big thing for the city. There was a lot of talk about parking places.
Right.
Maintaining the right number of, or a sufficient number of parking places, because they lost a lot of places to the CVS building.
Yeah.
The joke about that shopping center is you can park your car there, but you can't get out.
Well, actually, when they stripe the parking spaces, I've noticed it there. I think mathematically they're just enough that you need for a car, but
Well, you
Yeah.
can't open the door.
You can't open the door. Yeah. Well, but the reason for that was that they had to get in the maximum number of spaces they could possibly fit.
Yeah.
And that was and they also had a number of rows that were marked smaller for compact cars, and they still say compact on them.
right.
And as far as I know, nobody pays any attention.
No, they bring the SUV goes right in there.
Right. It fits.
Yeah.
And the other thing that it did was that it formed a standing committee that was to last for at least 2 years, and I think it actually lasted somewhat longer, to continue to work on problems as they came up. And that's actually the time I became involved. I shortly after that whole thing was done, Paul Myers moved away, and PSNA got another president, and they needed more people being active, and I got pulled into that and started being active. I think I was vice president for a while, and then something else for a while. And eventually, more and more turnover in the officers, but we've got a sort of stable set of people that are willing to serve as officers now. I've traded back and forth with Susan Hunsaker, who's the vice president of PSNA, and there are other people. I mean, actually at the moment, Susan is the secretary, and Ruth Riles, whom I know you know,
Yep.
is the vice president, and we've been sort of holding on for and keeping the association going since then. The other thing that I did back in the shopping center was that the city formed yet another committee to plan the redoing of the Somerville Avenue intersection.
Okay.
As you may remember, there was the old intersection was a very acute angle where the two avenues came together, and that was perceived to be a big problem. And the planners wanted to make it more of a perpendicular
Right.
intersection. You can see any way they redo intersections now, they all make them perpendicular.
Yeah.
I guess it's got to be somewhere engraved in some tablets that that's what you do. So they did that, and they formed a citizens committee for that. And we, again, met for like 2 years, and the city kept coming up with plans that did not include a left turn. And we kept telling the city that is not appropriate. There has to be a left turn. And we were really stuck. We went through a lot of money, and we spent 2 years working on it. Eventually, Kathy Bourne, of all people, was the person who came up with the suggestion.
Was she a counselor at the time?
She had retired by then.
Okay.
Or maybe she was still a counselor, but she was about to retire.
Right.
And it was basically to put the left turn lane more towards Harvard Square than the entrance lane, and to have the pedestrian crossing in between the two of them. And that way you could have cars coming out, turning left while pedestrians were crossing Mass Ave, and that allowed enough time in the light cycle to meet the traffic planner's goals of congestion. There's such thing as a Class D or a Class C intersection, and we were they were willing to take a C minus, but not a D plus, I believe.
There you go.
Yeah, she's smart about those things.
Anyway, so she figured this out, that somehow that this would fit. It certainly compromised people's idea of what the plaza, the little plaza in front of the CVS building would be like, because it now has a driveway running through it. But it worked. It worked as far
Yeah.
as getting the intersection going. And so that was a continuing involvement, not just for me, but for a lot of the neighbors. And it gave us a reason to stay together, other than simply reacting to the next big development that was coming along. And that's, I think, why PSNA has survived to this day. I mean, we're not large. We don't draw that many people, but you know, if I put out an appeal saying we have a really important issue, or we have an election, you know, pay your dues and, you know, and pay your dues and qualify, thing, we can get 20 people.
Right.
And that's, I think, pretty good.
That's
And we,
pretty good.
and,
Yeah.
you know, and, you know, and when nothing's happening, then we get 4 people.
Right.
But that's sort of the way it goes. And there's,
But
you
your
know,
voice is heard. I mean,
Well,
some
the
people
other-
might say
so-
20 isn't that much, but
Oh, it's
considering how
very-
much you can get done.
considering how things are, that's I think a significant number.
That's
Right.
very viable, right.
And I also spend the time of just watching and managing an email, you know, a remailing thing, which has got about 400, well, I guess maybe 300 or so subscribers from all over the city. And I try to keep that short and concise and not have people getting into wars on it and that sort of thing. And I think a lot of people value it for that.
I do.
I do, I really like it. It's
Yeah.
one of those when it's in your inbox, you want to open it and read it. You know, you want to see what's in there.
I think
It's
that this-
valuable news.
There's one thing that's worth saying about neighborhoods associations in general, which is, you know, the way they carry on through, you know, planning efforts or reacting to proposed developments, whatever. Every instance kind of either adds to or takes away from the credibility of an organization. And I think Porter Square has actually handled itself admirably ever since the very first times I've heard of them, back when we were involved with some Central Square things. First off, we were kind of we were cousins in a way as organizations, because when there was a Central Square Neighborhood Coalition, it was centered around a square with abutting neighborhoods all sort of associated with it. And that's not typical of most Cambridge neighborhood groups, which tend to be sort of just, you know, the roads and the squares are sort of at the periphery, right? And we, you know, with Central Square, we had a cooperative viewpoint with the business community and property owners and residents, and we were all trying to find solutions. I think the East Cambridge planning team has a similar philosophical outlook, and it always struck me that Porter Square was much more into cooperatively finding solutions rather
Right.
than just yelling and fighting.
Yeah, yeah, no, right. We certainly, you know, we certainly, when a developer comes in and wants to do something, we give them a hearing. I mean, it's not to say that we'll roll over and let anything happen,
Right.
but it's not just a don't do anything until you're angry and then have a big meeting.
Yeah.
Which is, unfortunately, I've seen that happen in a number of other circumstances.
Sure.
So we try to keep a continuing involvement. And I guess I should say also, you know, we also had a very positive dialogue with Leslie. Now, that wasn't just PSNA, it was people all up and down, you know, from Mass Ave.
The Agassiz Neighborhood
But
Council,
Agassiz
too.
Neighborhood Council was there. But again, there, the city formed like a 20-person appointed working group. And 2 of us from PSNA were on it, and there were more than that from Agassiz. And again, it was like 2 or 3 years of dialogue with Leslie over the whole AIB building and the size of it. And
Which
all
they
the
were
stuff.
moving the church today?
By the way,
movement?
the final move.
Oh, yeah, what
was-
happened there?
Well, I went and watched, and it didn't move while I was there, and it was too cold, and I took a couple of pictures and left. But I
But it
believe
had already moved quite a bit.
it had moved
Now-
sideways. It had done the sideways move, and this was to move it closer to Mass Ave, to its final
Right.
position. It was only going to move, it was something like 20 feet forward.
Yeah.
And it does move it's glacial,
It is glacial.
which is, I guess, good if you're moving a big building.
I think that's about right, yeah.
And the other thing that you did that was tremendous this year is that the candidates forum for the city council
Yeah.
candidates.
Mhm.
You want to talk a little bit about that? I think every single candidate came.
Well,
And you had
actually, as it turned out, we didn't get to. Tim Toomey dropped out at the last moment saying that he had a family, some sort of a family obligation. And we had one other drop out, and offhand, I can't forget who it was.
Could have been Logan Leslie.
Yeah.
I think.
Could have been Logan Leslie, yeah,
Yeah.
right. But we just decided sort of last spring, the election's coming along, this will be an opportunity to contribute something and actually to get a little positive publicity for PSNA. And so I called up Stephen Diamond from Agassiz and
Agassiz Neighborhood Council?
or Agassiz
Yep.
Neighborhood Council, and he said, yeah, sure, I'll be glad to work on this thing there. So the two of us really sort of did it. And at the time the idea came up, it so happened we were in one of our PSNA meetings, and Alice was sitting there. Alice Wolf was sitting there. She often comes to our meetings, and I turned to
Well,
her and
it's her
said,
area,
Alice,
too.
yeah, you're retired now. Would you be our moderator? And she
Did she
thought
get
for
upset
about.
when you said you're retired? She
No, I
doesn't
didn't
like
quite
people
say.
saying
I
you're
didn't
retired.
quite say it that
Okay.
way. I said you're available, and
Alice, he didn't mean it.
okay, and yeah, she's not retired. She's just changing her career.
Okay.
At any rate, she agreed remarkably easily, and it all
Well,
just
that's
rolled from
fun.
there.
It's
It all just-
fun.
And as you know, we picked Suzanne to the timer,
Yeah.
which I think was a crucial role.
Actually,
And Alice did such a wonderful job of moderating it. Nobody was going to cross her. And
right.
so they all
No,
behaved
no,
themselves.
she did a great job. Speaking of being a good timekeeper, we actually have about under a minute left for this segment. Perhaps you'll carry over?
I'd be glad to say.
Well,
a
maybe
little-
we can talk about some current events.
Sure.
Yeah,
Things
we'll
that
do
you're
that.
doing now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good.
All right.
And you're all welcome to call in.
That's right. The phone lines
Ask
are
John
open.
any question you want.
Oh. And I will give you any answer I want.
Absolutely. So.
So we'll be back in 3 minutes or so.
No. We see we have 14 seconds to go.
Oh, we do.
It's amazing.
All
This
right, John, do you know any good jokes?
There we go.
All right.
Anyway, until 3 minutes from now, this is Cambridge Inside.
And we're out.